Hello there, freaks and weirdos. Welcome back to another episode of D&D Creature Feature. This is the show where I read you a creepypasta based on Dungeons and Dragons, and at the end of the video, you're going to get something from that creepypasta, like for example the stat block of a monster, for absolutely free for you to use in your own D&D games. But before we can start with the story, I might need to remind you that this series has its own continuity, so if you're new and you want to know what the heck is even happening, might I suggest checking out the playlist you can find on my channel. There's 7 stories currently in it, and you might really like them. So, without further ado, let's dive in to this scary story. Little Trails of Blood. Edgar, I'm tired. We've been walking for hours, Valorie complained as we marched through the vast open fields. I'm sorry, that skinny freak probably would have killed me if I hadn't handed over these pages, I defended myself. Our original plan was to travel by carriage to the village that this E.H. character lived in. But after the coachman discovered that I had lost the spell scrolls that E.H. wanted, he drove off without us, practically leaving us stranded in the middle of nowhere. So we had to arduously travel on foot, with minimal resources, and even spend a night sleeping in the middle of the forest. That night unsettled me a bit, because the whole forest felt dead and lifeless. I don't think I've seen any animal during our travel, which was certainly strange to me. Eventually, we were out of the woods, both literally and metaphorically, as we found ourselves in a lush, hilly landscape, and Val spotted some kind of farm in the distance. We decided to head towards this farm. And as we arrived, we were greeted by a blonde, bearded man, wearing very modest clothing. Well, looky here, we don't see many travelers around these parts. Say, what brings you here? He exclaimed upon noticing our arrival. My name's Valorie, and this is my brother, Edgar. We've been hiking throughout the area for a couple days, and we'd very much appreciate if we could stay here for the night. We've got a few gold pieces that we could pay you in return, my sister announced. Well, you're in luck that I'm not as hostile to strangers as some other people. My name's Erwin Hailclump, and I'm the owner of this farm, he introduced himself. His name alerted me a little because the initials of Erwin Hailclump were E.H., so perhaps he was the one who sent us on this wild goose chase and almost got me killed by that slender man. Even if I was a tad suspicious, I still welcomed his hospitality, and so did Valorie. The farm itself wasn't particularly noteworthy. There was a large barn, a couple of fields of wheat, and a house that Mr. Hailclump presumably lived in. I was expecting to hear the noises of various farm animals out of the barn, but was met with nothing but eerie silence. Upon asking Mr. Hailclump about this strange detail, he responded, Unfortunately, lots of my cattle have died recently. Seems like a coyote problem to me. That explanation seemed somewhat logical to me, so I decided not to think about it too hard. Mr. Hailclump then invited us to enter his house, where we saw a short, brown-haired woman pacing around the living room while carrying a baby in her arms. Honey, you didn't tell me you were bringing guests over tonight, the woman spoke to Mr. Hailclump. Actually, these 2 travelers spontaneously stopped by asking for shelter in exchange for some money. Is that alright with you? He explained to her, and she softly nodded. Edgar, Valorie, this is my wife, Eleonora Hailclump, and our little daughter, Ellie. Erwin introduced the woman and child to us. Nice to meet you two, Valorie greeted Erwin's family. Afterwards, we all began chatting a little before the farmer family escorted us to a small guest room, where we were going to stay the night. Thank you so much for giving us a place to stay tonight. I expressed my gratitude to the gentle strangers before entering the room. The room was very cramped and dingy, with only one bed that had burn marks on the pillow, paint peeling off the walls, and some kind of weird stains on the floor. In all honesty, I didn't even want to know what the previous occupants of this room could have possibly done in here. Even though the room didn't look particularly sanitary, I was still massively grateful that we didn't have to sleep in the woods again, and Val and I soon found ourselves huddled under the blanket of the bed. It had felt a bit weird and awkward because we hadn't slept in such close proximity to one another since Valerie complained of having these strange, reoccurring nightmares of escaping a burning house a couple of months back. But eventually, we got kind of used to it. I think that I only got an hour of sleep before we were unceremoniously awoken by a blood-curdling scream that came from outside the barn. My sister and I promptly exited the house to see where it came from, and soon found one of the most gruesome sights I had ever seen just outside the barn. It was the fresh body of a goat. Its eyes had been ripped out, its limbs were horrifically twisted into unnatural positions. It practically swam in a massive puddle of guts and blood, and its entrails were wrapped around its neck like a noose. I glanced up from the dead animal and into the barn, only to realize that all the cattle in there were similarly mangled. All of them had this expression of immeasurable terror on their faces, and I knew that whatever did this certainly couldn't have been a coyote. I felt like vomiting then and there, but before I had the chance, another terrifying scream filled the night air. We were mortified upon realizing that it had come from the house of the Hailclump family. As quickly as possible, we rushed back inside, only to find that Eleonora was laying against the wall, covered in heavy bite marks, whimpering, They took her. They took my baby. Mrs. Hailclump, what did this? And where did it go? My sister frantically asked the bleeding woman. I don't know, it was too fast, and it escaped through the window of Ellie's nursery. Eleonora cried, and so we wasted no further time to chase after the horrific killer. After following a disturbingly large trail of blood originating from outside the window of the nursery, we were soon led back into the forest we had just left the day before. And the unsettling silence that had made me so paranoid persisted. The ground we walked on was becoming increasingly boggy as we made our way through the woods, and the blood we were trailing was heavily diluting due to the abundance of grimy water. Eventually, we heard a noise that made us relieved and also deeply concerned at the same time. The cry of a baby. We darted forward and soon found little Ellie laying in the middle of the marsh. Her kidnapper nowhere in sight. Upon stepping towards the small, hysterically weeping child, we heard a faint, guttural growl from behind us and realized that we had been lured into a trap. My sister and I steadily turned around, only to witness the grotesque creature that had mutilated all the farm animals and abducted the baby of the farmer family. It resembled some kind of massive hound covered in blue scales, with multiple sharp cyan spikes along its spine, and a pair of massive, bulbous eyes glowing red and orange. Valorie stepped behind me, grabbing the baby, as a devious lizard-like canine stumbled towards us, its bones producing this awful cracking sound with every step it took. Out of nowhere, the creature leaped at me, tackling me to the ground, digging its claws into my chest, and hungrily drooling on my face. Then, it opened its ghastly maw so wide that it almost unhooked its jaw like some sort of constrictor snake, revealing rows upon rows of needle-like teeth. But before it could horrifically maul me, Valorie slung a spell towards the creature, and it flew to the side before lighting up like a firework. The horrid monster was then impaled by the pointy branch of a nearby tree, and its intestines spilled out onto the moist soil, while Valorie covered the eyes of the baby in order to avoid traumatizing it even further. However, I quickly noticed that a tiny object appeared to have plummeted out of the creature's ripped open chest. It looked to be some kind of trinket, crafted from sticks and red yarn, with 3 small tassels attached to it. Why it was embedded inside this gruesome beast was beyond me, but I swiftly picked it up and placed it in my pocket. Afterwards, we were about ready to leave this gory scene behind us, when Valorie suddenly stopped dead in her tracks.
"Ed, do you hear that?"
She nervously whispered to me. At first, I didn't know what she was talking about, but as soon as I listened carefully to the surrounding noises, my blood froze in my veins. The same sounds that the scaly abomination had made were yet again audible and grew increasingly loud and cluttered. It was at this moment that I realized that no one creature could have possibly mangled all these animals all by itself, and that we were, in fact, not out of the woods quite yet, both literally and metaphorically. Valorie urged me to start running for my life as she spotted the horrible herd of at least a dozen more of these 4-legged reptile creatures sprinting towards us, and I did as she recommended. Even though I probably ran faster than I had ever before in my entire life, the monstrosities were faster still and nearly caught us at several points. My sister had handed me the currently screaming baby and shot multiple fireballs at our pursuers, which luckily proved very effective, as the majority had combusted by the time we were literally out of the woods around the dawn hours. The surviving creatures refused to follow us into the sunbeams, and so slowly backed away into the forest, while glaring at us with their beady eyes. I sighed in relief when we returned to the farm and handed the abducted child back to its parents, before informing them that the creatures that had slaughtered the cattle were slightly more troublesome than measly coyotes. They thanked us, and Valorie explained to them that the creatures can be kept at bay with fire and sunlight, so as to make the family a little less helpless for when the monsters inevitably strike again. We said our goodbyes, and soon my sister and I were on our merry way again. Shortly after departing, I realized that effectively almost nothing had changed since we stumbled upon the unlucky farm, as we, of course, didn't get much sleep that night. But now, I was in possession of a strange talisman, that I had fetched out of the insides of an imploded monstrosity. Real quickly, the next section contains spoilers as to what this monster is and how to defeat it. So if you're a Dungeons & Dragons player and you want to encounter this in your campaign, consider sharing this video with your DM. Alright, thank you. The Chupacabra is a savage quadrupedal reptilian predator that feeds off of the blood of animals, preferably cattle, and other farm animals such as goats or chickens. They exclusively hunt at night because direct exposure to sunlight weakens them, and they often live in packs of around 6 to 12 members. Typically, they inhabit swamps, as on top of being quick runners, they are also excellent swimmers. Their innate ability to sense bleeding creatures makes them popular underlings and companions to vampires, who use them to gather blood more efficiently. So, yeah, welcome to the end of the video. I hope you liked the creepy story and the gross monster to throw at your poor, unsuspecting D&D players. But like, in all honesty, I think the Chupacabra is a really cool and iconic monster, and if you do end up using this in your D&D campaigns, then please don't forget to write me some feedback in the comments. I would really appreciate it. And also, it would greatly help me if you like the video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss the next weird-ass story that I'm gonna crank out soon. So, without further ado, peace out and stay spooky, fellas.